Okay, it looks like I'm live over on YouTube. Let me put it in Discord. We're a little bit early for anyone who's like lurking already, but we'll be jumping pretty much straight in right at 6. So, hi Ian. And earlier it looks like Tony and Boosh Tiki Tiki and Shiba Scream, you guys were in chat. I don't know if you're still there, if you can hear me. I'm gonna post it on Instagram really quick so that everyone knows we're live, and it should auto post on Twitter. But if I like going live a little bit early to make sure people have a chance to filter in. It's good to remind people and try to be prepared ahead of time. Because usually when I start a stream, there's something that I'm forgetting, and it takes me a little while to figure out what that is. So hopefully today I haven't forgotten anything. Hello, Tony. Hi, Winter's Rain. Good morning, or good evening. It is definitely evening. It's pitch black outside. It's about 5:45. You like the atmospherics in the back of the painting. Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I just did this one as my warm-up. Hi, Amy. First time catching a Paintalong. Hello, welcome. Hey, Slave of Hell, you made it. I was wondering if you'd be asleep, actually. Anna. Oh, Kat's here. Didn't manage to change my YouTube name. Hi, Cats. Oh gosh, that's gonna be so confusing. I apologize if I call you by your username. I try to remember people's names if they tell me their name, but it takes a little while to get used to it. Hey, Ink. Welcome. Hi, Tisha. Okay, so you guys gotta tell me if the music is too loud or too quiet. I don't know. I don't want the music to be very loud. I don't want to like be trying to yell over the music. This is my normal talking voice, so if you're having trouble hearing me while the music is playing, let me know. You are asleep? Okay. Tisha, I'm glad you made it to the Paintalong, and there'll be a warm-up phase. Are we starting in 15 minutes? We are starting in 15 minutes. So if you haven't warmed up yet, maybe do a little like postcard size piece. Even if you're just like practicing gradients, warming up can be anything. It doesn't have to be a painting. You can be practicing swatches or gradients. Just like getting kind of into the paint mode is really what you need. So I'm gonna finish this little guy, this little warm-up that I was doing, which was just I'm gonna put a little more texture on the tree trunks. I mean, there's always more I could do to this one, but like I said, this was my warm-up, and this is kind of the style that I want us to be painting in today. I want this one to be like a very expressive landscape paint-along. I want you guys to have fun. Some people call it loosey-goosey, which means you're not fussing too much with getting it perfect. You're not trying to like copy a reference photo exactly. You're kind of interpreting a reference photo into a painting. So, middle of an ice storm, 7 inches of snow on the way. Oh my gosh. Be careful. I hope your power stays on and everything too, because I remember when we had really bad ice storms in New York, we would risk power going out, and I would always have to turn the computer off. Although these days, you know, you probably have a surge protector and stuff, right? Woosey doosey. Yeah, no. Or I don't know if Woosey's gonna make it today, but Trolling isn't the same. I know. The Twitch emotes are so great. I always miss them when we're on YouTube. So if anyone is watching this as a replay in the future, you can fast forward the video to about the 15-minute mark and then the paint-along will start. But right now, we're just kind of waiting for people to get here, and hopefully you guys are warmed up or are warming up. And right before we start, I'll just go over like my materials and what colors I'm using. But it's a pretty limited palette. Today is hopefully gonna be a fun, simple painting for you guys. Obviously you can go as detailed as you want, but I want to do it in a way so that it keeps it fun, keeps it light. How is the quality of video? Is the lighting okay? Because I can always try to turn the lighting up or change the angle of it so it can hit the paper better. I don't know, depends on what you guys need. Commands are working, yeah. I'll double check. I just updated that one as well. Ref is on. Yeah, see, it's just really slow. I noticed that last stream, the Nightbot response is extremely slow. Okay, so lighting is good? Okay. We'll just go with it, and if we need to adjust it along the way, just let me know. As usual, same with music, same with all the things. So, you guys, I just spent the last 4 hours at a 1-year-old birthday party, which I completely forgot was today. Yeah. Turn it down a bit. Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. I can barely hear it on mine, so let me know if that's okay. Hey, Corvulus. Yeah, so I was at a 1-year-old birthday party with lots of little humans and cake and there was champagne, however. I had champagne, so by now the effects have mostly worn off, but it'll be a fun paint-along either way. You turned up without a present? I did. I turned up without a present, but I made a card and I made brownies. So hopefully that made up for it. With the birthday kid? No. Excuse me. All the adults, no kids, were drinking champagne. Okay? Vader's present, Vader's toys. Poor Mr. Fox, always getting tossed around. Poor Mr. Fox. By the way, if you guys want to start getting ready, you can grab the reference photo. It's !ref, and it'll pop up a little link for you, and you can open that on your computer or download it and print it if you want to. Sometimes it's nice to have them next to you on the desk, but I like to have mine on my iPad above my painting. You just warmed up in light speed. Yeah. I feel like it's been a while since I've painted a watercolor forest, so I feel a little rusty as well. But we're just gonna go with it. I'm gonna try to have fun, and hopefully we'll learn something. I think either way, when we're painting together, I always learn something, because it's like I'm trying to explain things as I go, and while I'm explaining something I am figuring it out, and I'm like, oh right, yeah, this is how I do it. I don't know, it's so weird. Yes, Slave of Hell, you're the only one skilled at painting forest still. You should be teaching the Paintalong. The last Paintalong with you was a forest. Was it watercolor or was it gouache? Because we did a couple gouache ones, I think, and yeah, I can't remember what the last one was. Everything is blurring together. Time is an illusion. You don't think you've... Oh, ink! So it's been a while for you, hasn't it? Jumped out of the shower and made it. You made it! Yes! I'm just kind of messing around while we wait. Just so you guys know, I'll be using this side of the paper for the Paintalong today. So it's a 9x12 paper block that I just split in half with some tape, and I also gave myself a little bit of a shorter page. I didn't want to have like a really long vertical page, so I just cut off some space at the bottom. Actually, I wonder what size this is. It's about 5.5 by 7. So if I wanted to, I could, you know, if I really like the result, I could frame it as a 5 by 7. But not gonna get ahead of myself. So you might want to get your paper ready. We have about 5 minutes left. I could also just... Should I wait to start talking about the supplies and stuff until we start the Paintalong, or should I do that now before 6 o'clock? I'm always like so excited, I just want to jump straight in. Wait, don't forget, some people aren't here. I can't remember who wanted to be here that was talking about it during this past week's streams. Yeah, so, like some people set their alarm for the Paintalong, so they arrive either right on time or a little bit after. So I always want to wait a tiny bit so that people can filter in and not miss too much. Just curious, okay. So does anyone have any plans this weekend? It's already, for me, Saturday's almost over. This is like the last thing I'm doing today. And then I will probably be on the couch drawing on my iPad and eating snacks all night. Boosh Tiki Tiki, you made it! Hello, I saw you in chat earlier before I started. There were a few of you in chat earlier. I was like, what are they doing here? I'm just warming up, so don't worry, nothing is happening. Studying for your exam on Monday. Oh, okay. Well, I hope you're able to get some personal time in along the way. You're checking what time I was starting. Oh, okay. So tomorrow, I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like. It's been horrible lately. But either I'll be spending part of the day outside painting, but if it's miserable all day, then I will be packing boxes. I really hope it's sunny for at least part of the day so I can go out. I mean, it doesn't even have to be like really, really nice out. I just want it to be not pouring for at least an hour. Yeah, I've heard that, I guess it's a lot of the East Coast is getting quite a crazy storm. We just had really, really, really cold temperatures, and I don't even know how many days in a row we had crazy hardcore pouring rain almost all day, most of the days. There were a few spots here and there where it like stopped for a minute, but then it came right back. It's just like, oh, man, it's exhausting. It'll involve crisps. Yes, Gorbulus. Oh, I have such bad cramps right now, so I just want to go die on the couch. I just want to go draw and eat chocolate and whimper. But first, Paintalong. We can do this. Okay. I know, right? So, it is 6 o'clock, which means we are gonna get started. If anyone is coming in late, they will hear me talking about just the supplies first, so hopefully they still will be able to join in. But yeah, I hope you guys are ready. Oh, Shiva, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you don't feel good. I completely understand. I was really dying earlier today and had to take massive amounts of painkillers to survive, but I'm still kind of numb, so hopefully we'll get through the Paintalong just fine. But I hope you feel better, and maybe if you can't paint today, maybe you can paint tomorrow. Okay. So, welcome to Paintalong number 43, I believe. Today we are going to be painting watercolor forests. Well, a watercolor forest, and you can see I have the reference photo up here on the stream. I also have it in chat. If you type !ref, you can get a copy of that. This was my little warm-up inspired by this forest. Obviously I didn't copy the photo, but I just wanted to kind of loosen up a little bit and get started. So this is kind of the style that I want to go with today. I want it to be loose. I want it to be fun for you guys. I want you to just let go of your obsession of little details and trying to copy the reference photo exactly, and start getting used to like using the reference photo as inspiration for color and light, but not necessarily like copying everything in it. Like figuring out how to interpret a reference photo into a pleasing painting. And that's honestly one of the most fun things. I love doing it. I love getting a reference photo that kind of like sparks my interest and then making it my own painting, and trying to tell a story with it or something. So hopefully you guys will get something from that part of the Paintalong, and you can use it in the future with all of your own reference photos. Oh, Slave of Hell is trying to do the reference command, but it might be on a cooldown. Let's see if it has a cooldown. It only has a 5-second cooldown, so I will paste it for you guys. Oh, of course. Oh my god. Now it's in chat 3 times. Wow. So just FYI, the commands are a little bit delayed, obviously. So anyway, there's the reference photo. Get it, quick. So for the paint along today, as you can see, I have a 9x12 paper block. I split it in half with some tape. If you want, you can use the whole page. If you want to do a big painting, just know that if you're doing a bigger painting, it's going to take a lot more time to fill in everything, and you might fall a little bit behind on the paint along, but it's okay if you want to finish it on your own time and stuff. And then for paint, I'm actually using my little travel set, which I love. I am taking this one to me next week to Jamaica, so I want to get like really used to it. So I've been using it a lot. And for the most part in this painting, I am going to be sticking with these colors. So it's greens and blues, basically. If anyone wants to know the actual names of the colors, I will be saying them as I go, but I have indigo, cobalt blue, helio turquoise, and those are my 3 blues. And I have pyroline green and green gold as my greens. I'm also gonna maybe use a hint of one of the reddish orange tones for some of the tree bark, but only a tiny bit. So for yours, you can use any of your reds or oranges or browns if you want to. I have pyroline violet, potter's pink, and quinacridone burnt orange, which are 3 of my favorites. Occasionally, I touch a little bit of my yellow, which is it's opaque watercolor, so it's sometimes looks like gouache, but it's not. It's not as opaque as gouache, I found, but occasionally I'll use it as just like a little spot on like a highlight here and there. But I'm not planning on using it much in this painting, so that's that for the colors. For my brushes, I am sticking with my favorite. It's the Silver Black Velvet. It's a number 12. It's got a really plump body with a sharp pointy tip, so it's great for doing bigger areas but also really fine details. But for some of the really tiny, like these background trees you see here, I was mostly using these, which this one is like a nice skinny script brush. You can get extra fine details. And this is like a smaller round brush, just like a number 4 or 6 or something like that. Actually, it's probably a 6 or 8. With tape on them because they're falling apart. And I also have a very rough fan brush, which I sometimes use for these background leaves. So if I'm reaching for that, I'll try to remember to mention it. But you still can do a similar effect with your other brushes. You just have to kind of do lots of little dots as opposed to like one touching it once with the fan brush. Mine is has very rigid bristles. If you have a fan brush with very soft bristles, I don't recommend it for doing the leaves because it's so soft that it kind of gives you like a solid brush stroke as opposed to like random dots here and there. So I hope that made sense. Hopefully you guys were able to follow that logic. And then, you know, have your paper towel or wash or cloth nearby so you can dab it if you need to, but also sometimes you even use a paper towel to pick up paint in your painting. So if you do something that's a little too dark, you can grab your paper towel and touch it and it'll kind of lift it up if you do it fast enough. Sometimes if you're too slow, it'll soak in and you will miss your chance, but Arch's paper is pretty flexible, so I don't usually have to worry too bad about that. Before we get started on the painting, we're going to do a quick sketch. So if you guys want, grab your pencils, maybe an eraser, brush off all the cat hair. Oh, and lastly, I like to mention this. I use a big bucket of water. One side is my dirty side, one side is my clean side, although this isn't super clean. But the reason I like that is because if I have a lot of color on my brush, I can dip it into the dirty side and kind of loosen it all off, get it off the brush as much as I can, and then dip it into the clean side before I touch my paper or my pigment, and then it kind of minimizes some of that cross-contamination of your colors or getting it muddy. So if that's an issue for you, maybe try that. It might help you. Brush off the cat hair now too. Yeah, it's constant though. When I did my first wash of color on this side, there were like 6 pieces of cat hair in there. I was like, oh my. But once it dries, you can brush them off again. Nope, Ian, I'm sorry. You have to brush the cat hair off no matter what. It's the only way. Okay. So I have my reference photo up next to my iPad. So what is that emote? Is it a magic ball? Like a crystal ball? Okay, so what we're gonna do to start off is our sketch, and what I'm looking at in the reference photo is the way that the hill kind of goes. It kind of starts up here and kind of meanders down. So instead of drawing like a straight line, I try to do something kind of like this. Maybe it's a little bit, it kind of undulates. I don't know if that's the word I should have used, but kind of give it like a softer. And the cool thing about this photo and the forest, this is the forest that's right down the street from me. It is covered in moss, and it's like the thick, bouncy carpet of moss, and it means that it looks fluffy. Like a lot of times when I'm painting, I'm never trying to get like a hard geometric edge anywhere. I just get to paint like pillows of moss basically. So when you're doing your horizon line, if that's what you want to call this, it is kind of bumpy. Tell us our fortune. You're gonna do great in this paint-along. Yes. So in order to kind of figure out our lighting in this painting or where our shadows are going to be, we obviously need to know where our trees are going to be. So when you can either copy the placement of the trees that you see in the photo, or you can design your own. You can put a tree wherever you want. I'm going to try to go with the photo in this case just because it's easier for talking about it during the paint-along. So there's a giant tree in the foreground to the left side. So what we're gonna do is just quickly sketch in our vertical line for that. And if you start sketching and you realize you did something too small or too big, don't be afraid to erase. Also, you might want to erase some of your horizon line after you do your sketch. Sitting in Twitch for 10 minutes. No, Dex line. Everywhere that I posted about it, I said it was on YouTube. You know, listen. So I have my big tree in the front left. I'm just kind of using light lines for these, but for the most part, our trees are going to be silhouettes. So you don't have to go too light. You can use pretty thick lines if you want to. There is a tree way back here. It's about like halfway between the bottom of this tree and the horizon line. So that's where the base of it is. So I'm gonna add that. In this one, I did it really close to the foreground. So these almost lined up, but I'm not doing that in this one. So it's a little bit further away. And these two closer trees don't really show a lot of the branches. There's a few spots where there's like little broken branches coming off the side of the trees, but most of our branches are going to be on the trees further away. So then I'm going to draw in a few more, and I'm getting skinnier and skinnier as I get further away. We're not going to draw every single tree, but I do like to draw some of the more prominent trees just to help me with my composition, because this is like a really good way to fill your page, like figure out your composition early on in the painting. So, Dexline, I hope you're ready. I hope you're jumping right in. I hope you warmed up. For some of the extra skinny trees, I'm not even going to draw them. I'm just going to paint them later. And some of the like much further ones. but if you can remember, try to vary the bottom of your trees. So try not to make them all lined up on the bottom like this one. They're kind of staggered. So there's this one is here, this one is here, this one is here. Don't like put them all on the horizon. Don't put them all next to each other. Try to get some I mean, I can't, maybe it's hard to do random placement, but as random as you can. Because we very rarely have perfectly uniform forests. And occasionally, like here and there are going to be little bushes and other branches and things hanging down and going this way and that way. So that's going to come later. But for now, we just want to focus on getting our trees, our main trees, where we want them. If you want to do any rocks, you can throw some rocks in there now. I'll do my lines a little darker so you can see them. Okay. So I'll give you guys a second to catch up or finish yours. There's also different parts of the painting where the tree branch is, there's like fallen trees going across the forest floor, and if you want, you can throw those in. I don't think I'm going to put any in mine. I'm going to keep it pretty clean looking. I don't know if that's the right word for it. I'm not putting too much debris on my forest floor. Maybe little branches. I'll throw in some branches closer to the end or something, but so while you guys are finishing your sketch, I will quickly tell you about my strategy for like layering the paint and the lighting of the painting. So you can kind of think about it like we're painting the furthest thing away first, and then as it gets closer and closer, we'll start laying in the paint. Hi Laura, you made it. So in this case, we are painting the background layer, which in this painting is that very light greenish blue you see in the distance. So we'll lay in a wash of that color, something very light, leaving a little bit of sky showing through. So the sky is just going to be pure white in this painting. I mean, you could add color to your sky if you wanted to, but we will lay in that really light color and go from wherever we have it in the sky up here all the way down to the bottom of the painting. So anywhere besides the sky, if we have a light area, it's going to be that color. So you might not be able to tell, but this light area you see here is actually the same exact color you see here. It just looks lighter because it's next to dark stuff. Gonna have a go? You're gonna paint? Hope so. And then once that starts to dry, I'll kind of like test it here and there. You gotta wait for it to dry a little bit. But then we can slowly start laying in our, the hillside that you see. Even though it's in the distance, we still need some of it to be visible. So we'll start laying in some of that hillside and the mossy tones, and even some of the trees. If we want any of the trees to be kind of blurred in the distance, that's when we would do it, when this background is still wet. And it's kind of like a slow progression of building up those layers as we get closer to the foreground. So it's kind of like playing it by ear, but I'll try to explain the rest before we get started. So as you're doing that, it's slowly drying, and eventually it dries to the point where you're going to be able to do something like this, where you get like a nice hard edge and it doesn't blur into the background. And with that, we can lay in our distant trees with like a lighter blue tone or a grayish green. We want the distant trees to stay pretty uniform in color and lower in contrast and not as warm. So in this case, I'm going to use like a bluish tone, probably a diluted version of my cobalt blue. And we'll start laying in those trees and some of the little trees that kind of lean this way and that way. And as we're laying in those trunks, I will also be taking my fan brush and putting in some of those leaves you see. By the way, this is my new tattoo by Vader. It's really great. Added to my collection. So we'll lay in some of these leaves that we see while the tree trunks are wet, and they kind of all, the paint mingles together and you get like a nice loose background feeling. And then as that dries, we'll just continue moving forward, adding shadows on the forest floor, and then kind of towards the end we'll add our really dark foreground trees, using a much darker, much warmer tree bark color. For me, I used indigo and Pyrrolene violet and a little bit of my green mixed in. So it's a hint of warmth. It's more of the purple warmth. It's not, it's like a complementary to the green almost. So it really stands out. And that's it. Does that sound like too much? I hope not. Something I'm going to focus on in this one more than I did in my warm-up painting is I want to get a nice line of shadow coming from this tree, and maybe even one of these as well, but I kind of didn't do that in this one. I made it less shadowy looking. So like the reference photo shows, there's a pretty dark shadow going across the forest floor. However, photographs lie and usually they especially lie in the shadows. So in real life, because I know this forest so well, I know that that shadow that's going across the forest floor is actually full of so much color. It's got like tons of greens and blues in it, and it looks much more believable if you just don't use like a straight up black color. So we'll kind of keep that in mind as we go. So are we ready? Hope so, because I'm gonna get started. If you need to, you can kind of clean off your palette. I like to use my old paper towels. I usually keep my paper towels for like weeks and weeks and weeks and just keep reusing them for different things. You're almost done? Wow. Head of the game, okay. Is this a good height for the camera? I can raise it up if you want to see my color mixing, or I can keep it closer to the painting. What do you guys want? Or actually, no, it doesn't really show it. For this first wash of color, I'm going to be using my green gold, which is my lightest green color. So I'm just going to grab a bunch of that and toss it over here on the right. And I'll probably throw in a little bit of some green, like darker green, just so it's not like crazy bright. Like, I don't want it to be pure green gold, even though I love that color. Just dilute it like a little bit with something else. And then I will add a lot of water on my brush. Also, something that I want to remind you guys that I like to do. Yeah, where's my oh yay, I have scrap pieces of paper. So when you're using your round brushes, color mixing would be nice. Tisha one's closer. Oh no. I'll try to remember to lift my palette up when I'm mixing to show you guys what's happening. So I have the color in my brush right now. Lots of water, lots of color. If I do this, and I just kind of like lightly let it dance across the paper, you can see it lets a lot of the paper show through. So that's called dry brush. But if we get this whole paper wet with all of our color and then we touch in our other colors, it's called wet into wet, and it gets really soft and blurred and it kind of just flows around. So if you hear me say dry brush versus wet into wet, that's what I'm talking about. Palette cam. I wish I had a palette cam. I don't know. I'll have to figure that out someday maybe. But yeah, for this first one, what we're gonna do is let's try to keep the background nice and loose. Don't worry too much about it because it is gonna just kind of fade away. It's just in the back. So what I'm gonna do is start touching my brush down, and you can see I'm kind of tilting my brush back and forth and making sure that there's no solid like lines of color anywhere. It's rather like my placement of the brush, my bristles is rather sporadic. So you can see even like there's lots of crazy stuff going on, but that will add to the believability of the forest of the canopy later. So just paint straight over everything else you've done, take it all the way down to the bottom, and like I said, I'm leaving a little bit of sky showing through back there because I want it to look like it's a bright sky and that's coming, the light is coming down through it. So just keep adding it and filling it in. You might need to get more on your brush as you go, constantly replenishing. But that is now our lightest tone of our forest, besides the sky, obviously. So the sky is gonna stay the sky. It's gonna be white, and it's just gonna be barely showing through in the background. And if you need to, if you've added like a ton of water and pigment, you can kind of tilt it as you go. Something that I personally do in a lot of my paintings now is play with blooms, which blooms are like when you see, a lot of times they're accidental, but it's actually one is happening right here. So this is kind of like a bloom where there is a amount of water or pigment is spreading and it's creating a hard edge, and it kind of looks like it's blooming out. But in a forest or a landscape, certain landscapes, that actually looks really cool, and it looks like bushes, or it just looks like something in the landscape. So it's actually a useful tool if you can kind of figure out how to harness it. So if you want, while it's drying, you can come back in with a little color and just kind of touch it, add a little bit of water. Extra water will kind of help with the bloom. And just tip your paper a little bit and let it flow upwards. If it doesn't create a bloom, then you know, you got to practice to figure out what is going to actually create blooms. I didn't figure it out for a really long time, but it so depends on the exact amount of water you have on your brush. So I don't really want any down here, so I'm just going to let that dry. Or if you want, one thing that's really nice to do, if something is still a little bit wet, you can start adding just hints of shadow here and there. So you can, it's obviously going to be wet on wet, wet into wet, but if I start like running my brush here and there, it's going to be really soft. So you can think about, maybe you're going to place in like the practice run for your shadow of that tree. So I'm still using a really light color, but it's visible enough where I know, like, okay, so as this is drying and as I like come back in with more and more shadow, this is where my shadow of that tree is going to be. So it's like a little practice run for you, because that's going to dry very light and eventually probably not even be noticeable. Ooh, I got like a really nice bloom there. That's surprising. So try not to worry too much yet about how it's looking, because right now everyone's painting should look totally crazy and it's literally just the beginning. Don't worry. The first couple layers are always, as we say often, a hot mess. So now I'm gonna grab some just cobalt blue with a tiny bit of one of my greens. You can kind of change up which green you're adding, but I just don't want it to be pure blue. I want it to be heavily blue, but a little bit diluted. So that color, I'll kind of do like little tests here and there to see how dry my background is. So all of these trees we sketched in, those are like our main trees, which I'm glad we know where they are, but we also have to add in more trees so that it's not just like a bare forest. We want it to look pretty lush as we go. So this is when we can do some of our background trees. So I'm gonna do a couple lines of color just here and there to see. So this is dry, but this is not dry. So as you can see, touching that in, I have a nice crisp line, but then that one is kind of fuzzy, which is fine because it's gonna kind of fade off and it'll be fine in the background. But I'll just take some clear water and soften the edges of this because I want it to be blurry. Yeah, so we're just adding in kind of like random trees back here. I would go with skinnier trees for now if I were you. You don't want to go too big because usually, like with perspective, your bigger trees are going to be closer to you. So maybe err on the side of little scraggly trees. And yeah, I'm doing lots of these. So it's very, very light blue. It's diluted with lots of water. It's got just a hint of green in it. And I'm just kind of dragging my brush back and forth here and there. But, I mean, you can kind of go overboard by doing this. But as long as you're keeping it very, very light and diluted, it won't be too distracting. Your eye might not even notice them later. Like it'll be an afterthought almost when the viewer sees it. It's like in this side, probably one of the first things you look at is this, maybe one of these trees, but hardly anyone is gonna like look at this painting and immediately see this one line or this one line or this one line, you know? Those are just supporting characters in the overall story. So, how are you guys doing? I feel like I'm going really fast when I'm trying to keep it slow. It's just because like when things are drying, you want to do wet into wet, so you have to work when it's wet. But luckily for this painting, for the forest, a lot of times it's only the first layer or two where I'm doing wet into wet. Then after that, it's mostly dry brush, and it's much easier to take your time and kind of just work slowly from the background forward. You want to bloom? You know what? Boosh Tiki Tiki, that just gave me an idea. Maybe we should do like I don't know if I would call it a paint-along, but we could do like a mini tutorial for those types of things for watercolor that are maybe not as like not as much emphasis on them. Like maybe we could do a whole thing about blooms and how to use them and when they're a good idea to use. For me personally, I like using them in forests and waves. Waves, actually, if you can get blooms to work for you, they look amazing. So practicing them is the only way to do it. Like you can listen to me talk about it all day long, but until you actually sit down and do like 20 of them in a row and practice it and get that brush time in, it's gonna be impossible. So doing it together maybe will be more encouraging. Blooming with Sarah. Bloom along. Yeah. What else? What other kind of techniques? Blooms are definitely one. Maybe salt, although more and more people are using salt, so I feel like it's more common and a lot of people already know about it. Okay, I think we're ready. I mean, this is obviously still drying, but it's not gonna blur as much now. So we can do another little test. So I'm gonna take my cobalt blue again, diluting it kind of a lot because this is a test. So I'll just test over here. So when I do a test, gradients in a landscape could actually be a really useful thing. We'll do a test, and if you touch your paper like that and it doesn't immediately go, you're good. You can continue. So In this case, I am painting some of these really distant background trees. Maybe add a couple thicker branches coming off the side. And as I said, while we're doing these background trees that are a little bit thicker, I'm gonna take my fan brush and I'm dipping it straight into my pure green gold, and I'm just gonna dab it here and there while the tree trunk is still wet, because that will give me a really it'll mix with the tree trunk color and add to the kind of spontaneity feeling, the spontaneous feeling of that background. Oh, another thing I'll point out before it starts drying though is whenever you finish a tree trunk, you don't want it to just end at the bottom. So if you want to just take your time with your landscape, the easiest thing in the world is just to take a clean brush and dab it on the bottom of your tree trunk and just kind of soften that bottom so that you don't end up with like a solid edge at the bottom of your tree trunk, you know? Edge variation. Edge variation, that's a good idea too. Paper towels, your friend. Unusual colors in nature would be fun, so I don't just burn through all my sap green. I mean, yeah, Dexlight, it's up to you. You can always use a wild color palette if you want to get a really unusual color palette. I do that quite a bit when I'm doing gouache, and I used to do it a lot with landscape, with watercolor. Not as much anymore. Okay, so yeah, let's continue. Next tree, I'm looking for the trees that I drew in already. So that's this one. In terms of your darkness right now, you want to be darker than all of the other trees you've done so far, but you don't want it to be the darkest value. So if you want, just start with a little bit of a lighter color and then kind of gauge it from there. It's easier to add color than to take away. Sometimes you can't take away the color at all, so softening the bottom. And I'm going to come back in with my fan brush with some of that green gold. You could even flick the color onto your paper at this point if you want to get some really random looking leaves in the background. It's kind of up to you. Soft tree butts are very important. You can add, at this point you can also add like oranges and reds if you want to go with a little more of like an autumn feeling. It's really up to you guys, but I don't want to overwhelm you, so I'm trying to stay pretty basic. I know when I first started painting forests, I was very overwhelmed. It's like, how does? Where is my next tree? This one. So as you can see, it's still the bluish green color that I'm playing with, and maybe I'll add a couple. It's almost like solid. It's not solid cobalt, but it's close. And I'm just going down to the base. And again, you can always come back and add more color later, but for now, just getting that tree trunk in and mixing in some of the leaves into it. Coming back and adding like shadows to our tree trunks that's very easy later on, so don't try to do it all in one go, or don't feel like you need to. And again, like if you don't want to rush, you can just fade your trees down, because a lot of times when I'm painting pretty quickly, I will do the tree and immediately start painting the grass and all of the forest floor around it, but that can feel like really hectic, so I definitely don't want to do that in the paint-along. I'll try to keep it kind of like piece by piece so we're not freaking out for any reason. But hopefully by now you can see how, I mean, relatively straightforward this process is. And now you can kind of start to see how the bloom in the background became useful for me, because it really just looks like a bush back there, and it'll look even more so the more we add the detail in the foreground and everything. It'll look like it was really meant to be back there. Some people, I do follow a few people on Instagram that like literally know how to harness blooms in their paintings so well. And I know just from experience that it is really unpredictable, but the more you do it, the more you can kind of like convince it to do a certain thing. Whether it's based on how much water you're using and how dry the paper is, or how wet the paper is, and how you can like tilt it and even help it along more. So, you know, it's finicky, but it's doable. Hey, Watercolor, good to see you over here. We are doing a paint-along, which is probably pretty obvious. I was trying to be very diligent and starting it at 6 o'clock. So you're late to class, which means you have detention, but you can jump straight in if you want to and join us. I'm gonna get my little tiny brush. So this is a time when I didn't draw this in, but I'm going to add a little bit of a more detailed form now, a little background element. This is going to be a bush with some, well, a little like branch. Well, it's a bush, but it has branches, visible branches like this. There you go. Words. I can do English. So then you get your branches down, and then you come back in with your placement. And it's fine if it overlaps with that tree, it's okay. And we're gonna do a few of those, like kind of scattered throughout. But that'll just help with the lushness of the painting of the forest. You'll take it. Art class detention. Oh, you don't want to know what happens. You're gonna regret it. Because art class detention is in fact math homework. And in the background is just a song on repeat. Can you guess what song it is? You probably can guess because you are you know Twitch, you know the culture. It's Rickroll. You're Rickroll. You've been Rickrolled in detention. You love math? Dang it. Okay, fine. Economics. I actually didn't mind math in the middle school, high school. I never had to take it in college because I got like extra credits and stuff out of the way early. So it has been quite a long time since I've had to take an actual math class. I feel like I would be so lost. I can do the basic stuff that you need in like real life situations, but none of that fancy stuff. The thing I use most often is measurements, like related to my business. Economics, even better. Oh god. Oh, what can I punish you with? Nate? I don't even know. I want to say PE, but I also know that like Slave of Hell works out. Wade, I'm kind of guessing you work out, so that wouldn't be a punishment either. Man, I'll figure it out. All right, so next, let's add a couple more bushes in, like maybe near this closer tree. And then we are gonna do some of the forest floor stuff, some of the shadows, and then towards the very end we'll do these last trees. So I'm kind of saving those last trees because if anything is gonna be in the painting behind those trees, I want to make sure it happens first because it's just much easier to paint it that way. So if you want to add oops, that's like extra wet right there. I'm just mostly using straight up blue for this. I'm adding a little green here and there, but those are some of my random tree branches that I can now come back in and do some of the... If you want, this could also be a time you might want to experiment with like splashing some color on the paper, but be careful because sometimes the splashes are extra unpredictable. Oh my god, I feel like I have to sneeze like every 2 seconds. I'm like, oh no. Extra German classes for a slave. Yeah, you would hate that. Time to ban. Art Attention is modeling nude for everyone. Oh, you have to be the nude model? Oh man. Somehow I feel like Wade would still love that. Yeah, Wade, it's great to see you. You know what's really cool? So many people... Well, I don't know how. I guess I know how, because not everyone pays attention to what everyone else is doing, but I still am getting people from like the usual Twitch crowd who are like, wait, you stream on YouTube? Oh my gosh, I want to go check it out. And it's like, yeah, I've been doing it for a few months now, but come on over. But it just goes to show you that like literally everyone is in their own world. And like you think that people can easily keep up with what's going on in your life, but it's not. And that's so obvious when you say it out loud, because think about all the people you know. How many of them do you know exactly what's going on in their life? Probably not very many, except for the ones you talk to like almost every day. So it's the same for you. One and a half months. I only skipped one Friday stream, I think, Slave. I only missed one YouTube stream so far. Pretty proud of that. Okay, so we're gonna start laying in some of the shadows on the forest floor. So I am mixing my darker green, which is Paintalong green, which if you don't have that, you can do like actually almost any green and mix in a little tiny hint of black or neutral tint into it, because I can't remember exactly what Paintalong green is made out of, but it's basically black and green. So yeah, I'm using that color along with a tiny bit of cobalt blue. I might kind of dab the cobalt blue and the light green here and there as I go to kind of give some of that variety, but it's mostly that dark green. And how we're doing this is, what we want to focus on is the shadow coming from this tree. Maybe one of these, probably this tree. So these two trees, because like the light is right here and it's the direction of the sun is making the shadows come this way. So you're mostly only going to see those two shadows coming across that middle ground. And then the rest of the painting, I'm gonna kind of like vignette this area so that it's a little bit darker on the edges, and it'll just make this middle area really pop. It really stand out to us. So it'll just make the shadows more dramatic. So you can do it in whichever order you want to, but I think just to make it easy on ourselves, it might be good to do the shadow of this one and this one first, because those are the main shadows that are coming forward, which I can understand why that would be a little confusing because we haven't painted that tree in yet. How about, why don't we just paint this tree in and then it won't be as confusing. I like to do the shadows first for some reason, but I can understand how that would be weird. So let's paint that tree. Let's just do it. So this, we're gonna get our indigo, which is extremely dark, like really dark blue, and some Parylene Violet, which is also very vibrant. So basically we're making a dark, dark, dark purple. If you don't have those two colors, you can do a blue and a black, maybe a hint of red, so that'll give you like a really dark purple-ish. I'm leaning it a little bit more towards the indigo, the blue color, just because that's my preference. But you definitely don't want this tree to look too warm. You don't want to add too much red or too much brown or whatever. This is the tree that will be the warmest, this big foreground tree. But this one's gonna have a hint of it because it is coming closer to us and our eyes are capable of seeing more color variety, more warmth in it. So be brave and do this. Make a sound effect too. It's really fun. Paint over your painting. All those delicate little trees you did in the background, they now look even more distant and more delicate. The darker and more bold you get with these foreground trees, the more intense it'll be. That contrast is really what is going to give this painting life. So do your first layer, bring it down to the foreground, and then clean your brush off and just soften the bottom, because right now we don't want to rush through it. We're just kind of like want it to end there, but we don't want it to have a hard edge yet. And then if you want to, you can kind of do a couple like broken branches coming off the edge, because a lot of times with these really tall pine trees, more of the branches that have the leaves or with the needles or whatever are way up high, and all of the base up to like more than halfway are just broken branches. So if you do a couple of these little spikes, maybe not too many, it just shows you that your brain knows it's a pine tree. And that's it. So now we know that is where our tree is, and now we kind of can gauge how our shadow is gonna look or where it's gonna be. Also, the fun thing about adding these dark values is now we kind of know what our darkest dark is gonna be. And later when we come back and like fill in some of the other details, like I'll just give you a quick example. Now I know what my darker tone is. If I want, I can add some shadow to these background trees, just to like hint of it. And even just doing like that much will really start like adding to the believability. You know what I mean? So, but we're gonna go forward. Like I said, we're gonna do the shadows on the forest floor because we kind of need to fill in where the hill is coming down before we do anything too far in the foreground, like this big tree here and the stuff that's gonna be down here. We need to like fill in this area, like really get that nailed down. The atomic sounds. You always make sound effects. I want to hear what your sound effects are, Wade. Shake hands with someone, sound effect. What is it? I want to know what it is. What does it sound like? Okay, so we have our light. This is our highlight color, right? Now we need to figure out what our shadow tone is going to be. I am gonna go with a bluish green tone because the whole painting is kind of leaning that way, so it'll fit nicely. So I have some of my indigo and my green. I'm kind of just mixing, add some water. If you're nervous about it, just start lighter, because again, you can always add more later. And as I mentioned, on this left side, I'm going to start by laying in some of the shadow. You could potentially just paint straight over this tree, but I'm not going to. I'm going to paint about that much in, and then I'm going to get my bright green and touch a couple spots just to give it a little variety. But we'll be doing more detail later on this part. It's just like at the beginning. So as we get closer to the middle, we want to make sure that we leave this color showing through. So I'm going to be doing dry brush for the most part, and I'm thinking, okay, the sun is right here and the shadows are casting this way, so like I'm kind of just dragging the paint down from this area down. And this is kind of where you can see the hill in the distance. Okay, I need to like do this without talking. Kind of like that. And again, keep it light, get it placed down, and then you know where you can come back and add more later. And if you have to, you can pick up anything that is too much. Like if you work quick enough, you can pick a little bit up with your paper towel. But if the drier the paper is, the drier the situation is, then you have less time. So just keep that in mind. So we have that, and now we have our big tree right here, which is casting quite a big shadow. As you can see, I'm not drawing a straight line. I'm keeping it rather jagged because it wouldn't look very believable if it's just like a solid line going across the landscape, especially as a painting. Sometimes like in the photos it's kind of weird because it almost looks like it's a straight line cutting through across the forest floor, but there really is a lot of like variation to the edge, but cameras just have trouble capturing shadows. And occasionally I'll toss in like a couple dots of green, lighter green or darker blue, just depends on the situation. Also, you can even take like one of your really skinny brushes and do a couple like vertical grass lines, because sometimes like a whole piece of grass will be in shadow, so it just gives it a nice variety of form. No, I have not tried those. I haven't really looked into anything like that. Okay, so those are our two like darker shadows that go across the foreground. But they're not quite dark enough, so I'm gonna come back in and make mine a little bit darker. I mean, there's like way more shadow. There's a lot of shadow in this landscape, but it just depends on what you're trying to make yours look like. Like if you want yours to be kind of spooky and dramatic, you can go really, really dark and it will look very intense. Okay, I just want to, oh yeah, and so I said earlier I want to add like a vignette around kind of this part, which means it's a little bit darker, and that'll make this look even brighter. So I'm just going to get more of my darker green and my cobalt. Oh my gosh, it's been an hour so far, and I'm going to lay in some of that darker. It's still dry brush. I'm still kind of changing the angle of my brush depending on what I need, but this is where the shadow of this tree is going to be, so I don't have to let a lot of light show through there. You can even like brush it up into that tree, but I'm going to soften that edge a little bit. Okay, so we're starting to get the feeling for the lighting situation, right? I hope you guys kind of have an idea of where most of your shadows are going to be, because after you do that, you're kind of like free to just play with increasing shadows, doing a little bit more detail on some of the forms. Obviously we still have to add this tree. But yeah, it's at this point in the painting, most of the difficult stuff is done, so you can kind of have fun. I hope you've been having fun the whole time, but it's time to get brave. Basically, as soon as this dries, this background, we're gonna do this tree, this final silhouetted tree in the foreground. And again, it can be kind of scary, just like with that one. It can feel a little scary painting a dark thing over the whole painting, but trust yourself. You missed it since you just found this channel. Oh, hello, welcome. I am working on Arches cold press. It's a 9x12 sheet that I just cut in half, or you know, split in half with my tape. If I zoom out, you can kind of see. But I'm trying to keep it zoomed in so it's easier to follow. Also, just to point out, this tree, the tree trunk actually stops about here. So I painted over the tree just to make sure I like covered my bases with that shadow area, but it really does come to about here. But because the tree trunk is going to be so dark, it doesn't matter if I paint over that green, you won't even see it. But we just want to make sure that this background is dry, because if this is wet and we start painting that tree, it's gonna like fade into our wet paint, and that's gonna suck because that's not where we want the dark paint. So just be careful on that. If your paper is really wet and you have a while, maybe go get a hair dryer or something, so it kind of speeds up the process a little. But while you wait, there's always so many things you can be doing. Because I'm guessing that most of this area on your page is pretty dry. This is probably a wet area. So like if we look back up at these trees, we can kind of start seeing where we want to add a little bit more shadow. Like for instance, anytime a leaf overlaps a tree trunk, if you do just like a hint of darker color, it'll make it pop even more in the foreground. It'll make that leaf look like it comes even further in the foreground. So let's see, let's give you a good example. Like over here, also I'm holding this up to make it easier to see. If I add darkness around these leaves, you kind of get an idea of what I mean, right? And then when you kind of zoom away from it a little bit, the eye just like, it tricks the eye into seeing leaves in front of the tree trunk. So you can do that in some spots and then leave other areas a little bit more soft. Like if you like the way it looks with the leaves kind of bleeding into the tree trunk, just leave it, which I often do. I like having a mixture of those two things. So, but little tiny things like that will just really start making it look more believable. You can also do with like a hint of your reddish tone or your brownish tone. You can do a little bark texture just by like dry brush up and down the tree trunk, letting some of the blue show through and some of it getting covered up. But only in your foreground trees. Like don't do any of the really far distant trees away, because there's not like the whole atmospheric perspective thing, usually you don't see a lot of warmth in those further forms. So yeah, while this part's drying, which mine is probably already dry, but I want to make sure I wait for you guys. You can just slowly start doing little things in the foreground, or as you get closer to the foreground. So also a second layer on this darker tree I think would really help make it, it's kind of flat right now. This color is pretty. I really like this color, but it's looking a little bit flat. So what we can do is add a tiny bit of a darker tone to our brush, whichever colors you want, and then just do a dry brush on top of it and like really let that bark texture show through. So does that make sense? You can kind of get a variety, and those darker ones you add will now be like the shadow within the bark. And the darker tone that you put down before becomes the lighter part of the bark, which is crazy because it was really dark, right? Okay. Okay, well, mine's dry enough, so I'm gonna just go for it. Are you guys gonna go for it? Are you ready? So we're gonna mix a lot of that dark color this time because we have a bigger area to fill in. It's like heavy. I'm gonna add a little bit of my quinacridone burnt orange as well. And then doing this also shows you like how light something will dry in watercolor. I don't want the edge to be perfect, so I'm gonna kind of make it a little bit more jagged. Also remembering that my tree's trunk kind of stops here. A little bit closer. As I get closer to the bottom, I'm kind of lifting my brush a little bit more and more and more and leaving some of that showing through, but then I'm gonna just immediately fade it into my shadow color. So I'm taking my green and my blue like I was doing earlier and just dragging that shadow to the left. And it'll just take care of itself. It'll dry and blur and stuff together, and it'll just be much better than like a hard edge, a hard bottom, and even like just fading it into the grass like that. So just little bits here and there. So where do we send the picture so people can see it? Please send it to either my email or you can tweet it to me, Discord if you're on my Discord. But email is probably the best just because it's like the highest quality and I can keep track of them really easily that way. Hey Gino. Good morning, Indigo. So yeah, and you don't even need to take a high quality photo or anything. If you can, get your photo in good lighting. And if no one knows what I'm talking about, let me say it really quick. At the end of this paint along, if you can take a quick photo, a snapshot of your painting, and you don't even have to color correct it, crop it, anything. You just shoot me a photo, email, Twitter, all the things, and I will make a collage of everybody's work and share it on social media. I usually try to do that on the following Monday, so if you can get it to me by like Sunday night in the UK, then you'll be in the collage. And if you want, you can remain anonymous. You don't have to have your name on it, but I'll either put like whatever name I know you by, like your username, or if you tell me something in the email, then yeah, it's an awesome way to like inspire other people to try, because a lot of times I get people who have never done watercolor before, but they see the collage and they're like, wow, this is so cool. So many different people, different styles, different skill levels are doing it. Like, I really want to do it. And it is the final thing that encourages them to try it. So it's one of my favorite things. It's so cool to see all the different people's color choices and the way that they define the trees and everything in one collage. Your crap paper gonna follow in the next one. Okay, sounds good. Native to the UK? No. I'm sure my accent gives that away. I'm originally from the US. I'm from half my life in New York, half my life in Colorado. So the last 10 years before I moved to Scotland was Colorado. But yeah, I know my... Maybe you were even joking when you said that. I don't know. You know what's funny though? A lot of people I meet in Scotland think I'm from Canada. I don't know why. To me, I don't have any accent, but that's just because it's my own voice that I'm used to, you know? But so many people think I'm from Canada, which I don't mind. Like, I almost don't want to correct people when they say that, but you know what's so funny? Nowadays I'm like, oh, I'm from Colorado. Like, I don't even say I'm from the US, I just say I'm from Colorado. Which is, I also find that people are really into it because they all say, oh, John Denver. And I'm like, yes. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna just make my vignette a little darker. There's like a lot of moss around the base of this tree. You pegged me as East Coast, really? They're too nice. Oh my god, sunny Scotland. Sunny Scotland lately has been brutal, just like so rainy. It's just relentless. But it's winter, you know? It's oddly enough, people always joke about how it's not sunny in Scotland. However, since I moved here, and I've been here like off and on for since 2016, we had one summer that was so freaking sunny. I felt like I was in Colorado all the time. Colorado gets more than 300 days of sun a year. That's where I came from. That's what I'm used to. So that summer here where it was crazy sunny and really, really warm was so strange. Even people here were like, this is really abnormal. And then this past summer, I got more of a normal Scottish summer, which was very moody. It was sunny a lot, but it was also rainy a lot and also windy a lot and cold and warm. So yeah, it's so random. A few Canadian words away from sounding Canadian. I don't know. Yeah, who knows? So occasionally in the forest floor, there's like extra shadowy pockets. Maybe like it's a little mound of moss or something like that. So I'll put like little things here and there. But for the most part, I'm just keeping it to like it's a lot of dry brush. You can also add some water if you need to like soften edges anywhere, but just like slowly building up some of the textures in the forest floor. You could add rocks, you could add trees, falling trees, branches, whatever. You're in Seattle? Lack of accent, especially Connecticut. Huh, interesting. Yeah, I don't have like one of the common or well-known accents of America, like Southern accents, really noticeable. Texas accent is really noticeable. Boston, you know, there's certain pockets of the US that have really intense accents, but mine's pretty neutral, I guess. Although I do say wicked, like, oh, that's wicked cool, and that apparently is very much a I don't know if it's an upstate New York thing or like a New England thing, but a lot of people would slag me off for that one. How are you guys doing on your paintings? Are you feeling okay? We're not quite done yet. We still need to do the bark texture on this tree and start really pumping up some of the shadows. You feel done? Well then that's okay. You can be done. You're excused if you need to be. We've done another Paintalongs very similar to this one. Like we had a bright sunny forest with long shadows coming towards us. I know we did that in the past. Maybe even multiple times. But I feel like there's always something to learn from painting forests. So I love doing it. I find it very relaxing too, of course. I ended up getting bloom on the tree on purpose. Is it a happy thing? Is it a good thing? You went a little light on the colors. Okay, yeah. Feel free to beef up the colors and make it your own. You know, if you like the reference photo, copying the reference photo is fine. Just practicing mixing colors and all of that. It's so useful. But you can also just kind of go off on your own and do your own thing with your colors. Not on purpose, but it looks cool. Awesome. Thank you for posting those, Slave of Hell. I had a fairly easy winter this year. Wait, a shovel for 60k? What? What? Some more bark texture to this one. So hopefully today's paint-along was a good, if you haven't done anything like this before, was like a good intro to painting really loose. And this is exactly the kind of approach that I would use if I was painting outside. So sit down in the forest, look at your scene, paint that background layer first, let it dry a little bit, start touching in some of those background trees, and just like slowly building up those layers to the foreground. Because especially if you're painting outside, you really only have a short window of time where the lighting is the lighting changes so fast. So if you have like an approach like this, a repeatable strategy that you can use, it definitely helps speed up the process so you maybe don't lose that light and you're able to capture it. That's kind of one of my things I like to focus on, is like, what kind of stuff can I do in the studio that I can translate to my plein air painting, or like take it outside and still be able to capture something really pretty or do a good job with it. You were in your comfort zone, so it was good. Okay. Oh, it was a joke, Bumblebee? Yeah. Alright. I think that's dry. So my big tree is dry, so I'm going to be able to add some of that bark texture. And so for the bark texture on this, I am mostly going to be using my Paintalong Violet, which is a really intense reddish violet with like a tiny bit of indigo. But I'm leaning it, now this time I'm leaning it more towards the Paintalong Violet because it'll stand out a little bit more against this dark color. So you can see it, right? Yeah. Definitely a very dry brush and just vertical lines because that's how the bark grows on this tree. And I'll just do it all the way to the bottom. I may filter it down to like a cobalt-ish color at the bottom, but I like how that Paintalong Violet makes it stand out a little bit more. But if you feel like your trees are looking a little bit too flat, try to add a little texture to them like this, because sometimes it's all it takes is just one layer of that extra texture and it really comes to life. It's usually like the last thing I add because I like the drama of waiting until the end and it's like, aha, it's a tree. Sometimes this is a little easier with a super tiny brush like this, but that's okay. But yeah, we're pretty much done. So there's like, you know, always things you can keep doing. You can add little branches here and there. You can add more grass textures, but I don't know, like it's up to you guys, whatever you want to do to I always say beef it up, but that sounds weird, but yeah. Smart Art Products, and they have a heavy duty clip with a mesh that you can poke your brush in. Oh, I think I've seen something like that. I didn't know it was a mesh. I thought it was just like a cup with a clip on it. Done and signed. Excellent. Yes. So let's see, next stream, I am streaming on Monday over on Twitch, so if you want to hang out, I am doing my long 6-hour stream on Monday, and then I still haven't figured out when I can do my next YouTube stream. I'm going to try to do it next Thursday. I'm leaving next Friday for Jamaica, so I'm a little freaked out about, guys, I have 1 week to pack for Jamaica and pack to move my house, and then when we get back from Jamaica I have 1 week to pack the entire house, so I'm slightly losing my mind. But I'm gonna try to squeeze in a YouTube stream next Thursday as well before I leave, but you can be sure that I am gonna take lots of photos and videos in Jamaica. I'll post, like, I don't know what it'll be. I'll post videos when I get back. Probably I'll do a couple like plein air videos in Jamaica and maybe like a mini vlog. I don't know if I really want to do a vlog because I want to just like really relax and enjoy the time that I have there. But I can definitely see myself doing some painting videos because I'm planning on painting a lot when I'm there. I'm super excited about that. But I realized it's like our first actual vacation in years and years and years, because we never even took a honeymoon, and we've done like a couple weekend excursions here and there, but we haven't yeah, like it's our vacation, our only vacation. So I need it to last a very long time. Understand if you need to skip some of this. No, I don't want to skip. I don't want to like ruin my schedule. But I have to be realistic. Like if I only have so little time to do everything, then something has to budge, right? But I believe I can do it. I just have to like, you know, sit down and do it. I have to pack. I have to figure out where to store things while I'm packing, because like a lot of times I'll pack a bunch of boxes and then those boxes get in the way and I can't pack any more boxes. So it's this ongoing struggle. Moving is just the worst. Ugh. Tend to make it overcomplicated. Yeah, I mean, look at me. I'm sitting here messing with it. I can just keep going and going and going, but I really should just stop. But it's fun, you know? Just want to keep touching it. Keep playing. But yeah, we should just call it. So if anyone wants to send me their collage, you can email it to me, send it to me on Twitter. If you can do it before the end of the day tomorrow, that would be awesome. But actually, yeah, I would need it by the end of the day tomorrow in the UK, because I need to I need to make the collage and all the things so I can post it for Monday. So I think I'm actually going to release this Paintalong video for my YouTube channel for the public, because it's the first one of 2020, and I really like to do like 1 or 2 a year that I release to the public to just give everyone else a chance to see what they're like. But otherwise, like usually the Paintalong videos, I record them and I make them available exclusively to my Patreons. So that's how it usually goes. I think I'll release this one and just see how it goes. So if you're watching this out there, thanks for watching. But I am doing this because my patrons are so amazing. They support me so much, and it wouldn't be possible without them. So thank you, patrons. And I hope you guys had fun today. I always feel like we need to go raid someone because we're used to streaming on Twitch, but I guess we're just gonna end. Yeah, so thank you guys for joining. Feel free to keep playing with your paintings and touching them up and stuff, and send me a photo. I would love to see it, and I can include it in the collage. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you on Monday over on the Twitch stream. All right. Bye guys, have a good night. See you again pretty soon.